G'day guys, it's Adam here. I'm just going to show you guys a little bit about the construction of this large outdoor hybrid turtle and Australian freshwater rainbowfish tank that I'm building. So it's a similar line to what I've done inside my shed here with my saltwater tanks, and it's a hybrid between a timber base, wall and end wall, and glass front wall and end wall here. This one I've done a little bit differently and a little bit on the cheap actually, I must admit, because I'm not made of money. But normally what I've done, and I'll show you later on inside, is I've used marine ply, 18mm, and I've laminated 2 sheets of marine ply to the base and used 1 sheet of marine ply for the walls. That's inside. But out here what I've done a little bit differently is this time I've decided to use construction pine ply, and I've fixed that to a base or a subfloor and stud walling. So I've given the strength of the construction to the stud walling and then just sheeted it, and then relied upon that as the strength as opposed to laminating plywood. Some of the products that I've had to use for construction of this aquarium is obviously the plywood and the timber, and I'll show you that. And to waterproof the plywood, I've gone back to my trusty old boat coat. And boat coat's an Australian product. It's a 2-part epoxy. So you're mixing 2 parts of the epoxy resin to 1 part of the hardener. And this product is used in the timber boat building industry. It's really, really good. It soaks in really, really well as a first coat to the timber. And then with subsequent coats, it actually builds up that waterproofing layer. It's not UV stable, I guess you'd say. So inside, not a problem, but outside, if I just left this plywood coated with the boat coat resin, it would degrade from exposure to the sun. So it has to be coated with something. So I had 2 choices. One which I've done before, and that is use a polyurethane 2-part product to apply over the surface. In this case, what I decided to do is to give this product here a go. This is the Cromlin Pond Sealer in black. I've also got some fabric to apply to any of the joins, an internal corner, and before I put down the fabric, the reinforcing and the membrane, I've actually got a Cromlin polyurethane sealant to run through any of these gaps. Then after I've done that, I can actually apply the rubber pond sealer membrane over the top. So it's a little bit different to doing a polyurethane seal, which I've done before. So we'll see how that goes. So here's a little bit of a video about the construction of this tank so far. I actually made a bit of an error in that last video in saying that it was 70 by 35 subflooring and stud walling. I actually chose 70 by 45. And what I've done is actually build that subfloor on the base. I've screwed the subfloor at 300 centres. Sorry, actually correction, 200mm centres, which is 8 inches apart. And you can see I've used stainless steel screws, decking screws, to screw the plywood down. For the walls, I chose 300mm centres. And I screwed the plywood down. Now here's one downside with this pine ply, is that it's nowhere near as good quality compared to a hardwood. But a hardwood's $200 a sheet. I've used 3.5 sheets here. So you do get these kind of splits and things like that. Another example in the pine is you can get some cracks like that. But what I've done there is I've made sure that the cracks and splits are well and truly filled with the resin, the boat coat resin. There's another example there. And combined with being screwed and glued at 200mm centres, it is well and truly supported. Here's an example of how I need to fill. I'm not exactly sure what happened there. It's a pretty bad construction joint, that one. But there's a gap there that needs to be filled. I'll use the polyurethane sealant. There's the internal corner, which needs to have the fabric inserted into it to support it for the rubber membrane to go over. So once I've run that polyurethane sealant down the actual joint, I'll use this internal corner will go in there along with the fabric, and then I'll wet it down with the first coat and second coat of the pond sealant. So again, there's an example of that ledge. Plywood sits on top, and the glass will sit on that ledge and be held back by not only silicone but also that edge board that will go across the face. And the basis of this construction is that once the actual shell, I guess, is constructed and sealed, the end and the front glass panels actually sit, and I'll show you a bit closer in a sec, but actually sit on a lip here, which is formed by this top sheet of plywood being held back, 15mm in this case, because I've got a 12mm sheet of glass plus 3mm of silicone, held back from the bottom. It creates that ledge. And what I would do is use, this is just an example of 90mm hardwood decking, a timber fascia board across the front, and then that creates, with that lip and the board, it then creates a valley, which I can fill with silicone, and the glass will sit down inside. And there's a bit of an example of the stud walling that I've done. So because it's pine plywood, obviously I didn't want any surface to be exposed to rain and potentially rot. So on the underside of the flooring and the back side of these walls, I've done 3 coats of a waterproofing product before gluing and screwing it to the framing. So where am I at now? I'm getting ready to use these guys. The sealant, the fabric, and the rubberized membrane from Cromwell. So one thing I noticed about this Cromwell pond sealer in black is that when you actually open up the lid for the first time, you can see that it's actually got a purpley blue kind of a look to it. Don't freak out. Just got to give it a good stir, and it'll go on looking sort of purple and black or indigo kind of a colour. But as it dries, as you can see behind me, it just dries to a plain straight jet black, and it does say that on the instructions. Alright, so that's a bit of a rundown of how I've constructed the aquarium so far. What have I done? I've built the subfloor, I've waterproofed the reverse sides of all the plywood before fixing it to the subfloor and the back wall stud walling. I've applied 3 coats of the boat coat product. First coat, I diluted a little bit with a splash, just a splash of methylated spirits. That's like a splash into 300ml of resin, tiny amount. And that just allows it to sink into the actual timber a little bit better. And then I've used the subsequent coats neat. Just either brush or with a roller, or in some cases I've used just a spatula just to screed it into the actual joins and whatnot. And between coats, I've let the epoxy dry or cure, which takes 24 hours, and I've given it a sand, a wet sand, with a 120 grit sandpaper, and that just allows the second coat of epoxy to actually adhere. You can actually do a wet-on wet method, whereby you apply one coat, you wait for it to go tacky, and then you apply another one. It's just that it just hasn't worked with my work to do it that way. So what I'll go do now, I'm going to use the polyurethane sealer to fill that back gap and run along the bottom gaps. This goes off in about 15 minutes, in which case I can actually use some of the pond sealer just to wet any joins. I can press the fabric into those joins, and then I can actually do the first coat of pond sealer over the top. I believe this pond sealer needs 2 coat minimum in different directions. First coat this way, second coat this way, and I think I need to wait about a week for it to cure before I can fill the water. Yes, that's right, 1 week. So, let's get busy. Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. If you've got any questions regarding that video, pop them down in the comment section below and I'll get onto those as soon as I can. And if you're into the greater side of aquarium keeping from an Australian perspective, check out my channel and subscribe. And I'll see you next time.